Welcome back to the Made for This podcast, where we want to help you discover, develop, and live your unique purpose in the world. We like to call that your Made for This, but basically what that is that's your mission in life, your unique space and purpose in the world, what you were uniquely made for. Now, typically on the show, you're going to hear from my co-host, Nikki, and a lot of times a guest who will be interviewing, or maybe who is some sort of expert in a field that is related to the Made for This. But actually, in this episode, I'm going to be flying solo for the very first time on the show. You may occasionally get episodes where, it's just Nikki, or it's just me, or maybe we turn the reins over to one of our subject matter experts and they run the show without us. But today, I'm just going to kind of just walk through something that I feel has been really instrumental in helping me to discover my Made for This and to really step into what it looks like to live that out. And so I know that I tend to be a little more on the nerdy side. I tend to nerd out over weird things like, organizational mission statements and strange things like that most people see on the wall wherever they work and don't ever think about again. But for me, those things have been really, really important for me to determine how I can actually make an impact wherever I am. If I work at a company, or if I'm part of a nonprofit organization or whatever, then being able to really understand what their mission is, what their vision for the future is, and how they operate, their core values, has really helped me to recognize how my unique purpose, my Made for This, fits into what it is that they're doing. And so that's why I've always found it to be really valuable and important for us as individuals to also kind of navigate some of those things. Now, no, you don't have to have the formal, company mission statement, whatever, placard on your wall. And, you don't have to get super nerdy like I do, but I think that it's really, really valuable for us to know how to articulate some of these things in a way that we can sort of hold ourselves accountable, tell our friends and family about, and our colleagues that maybe they can hold us accountable, but also just so we can continue to develop as our lives and our experiences evolve. We will continue to develop these things, and we'll get a little bit closer to, pursuing that unique mission that we have in our lives, our Made for This. Just to define some of those terms, I think your mission in life would be sort of synonymous with your Made for This. Why do you exist? Your vision is sort of your perceived future, or the desired future, what you hope to see the world become. And ultimately, you're always kind of chasing this vision. And if you were 100% successful in your mission, if you perfectly and beautifully executed your Made for This, then your vision would come true, whatever that looks like. And then the last thing, it's mission, vision, and values. The last thing is your core values. And that's where I want to spend some time for this week's episode of the Made for This podcast. And I want to use a book that has really helped me sort of navigate these concepts. What's interesting, and I've got the book right here. This is, if you're watching on YouTube, you can take a look. If you're not, we're going to leave a link for this in the show notes, and you can check it out. Now, this is Patrick Lencioni's book called The 3 Big Questions for a Frantic Family. Now, what's interesting about this book is it is not about business or organization or really even leadership necessarily. I mean, it's all of those things, but it's really geared towards a family. And I can say that this book particularly resonates with me because my wife and I are failed foster parents. We fostered three littles that have now all been adopted, and we have no more rooms in our house. And so we are no longer fostering currently. But all 3 of our kids are their ages 4, age 4, age 3, and age 2, and all of them were born within a 12-month spread of one another. And so we've got 2 biological kids that were born in less than 12 months apart, and our oldest was born just 4 months before the middle guy. And so this book really, really resonates with my family and I because we are a frantic family, and it has been just obviously chaos with a 4-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 2-year-old. You can't imagine the number of diapers and all the things, maybe you can. If you could resonate with that, if you've had kids that tight together in terms of ages and that spread, leave me a comment. Let me know. I would love to talk to you because I could probably use some advice. I gotta say, I'm scrambling day by day to make it. That's why Frantic Family really stood out to me. My wife, however, seems to make it look super easy. I don't know how she does that, but leave me a comment with any advice that you would give me if you know what I'm going through there. But just to kind of transition into what I got out of this, first of all, it's an awesome book. You should check it out regardless if the mission, vision, values thing is going to work for you. And you should check it out regardless if you have 3 toddlers at the same time. Um, I would maybe not suggest having 3 toddlers at the same time, but it is what it is. But I want to just take a quick look at where it leans into this idea of the core values. And so the whole premise behind all of Patrick Lencioni's books are great, but the whole core premise behind how he creates these things is he writes kind of a fictional story that you can follow along with, and you can kind of start to identify with some of the characters. Like, okay, they've got a crazy family situation, and it's different than mine, but and he takes a real life scenario and he applies a leadership or business principle to it. And then in the back of the book, you just get kind of the nuts and bolts model on how do I implement this thing in my life. My wife and I actually sort of jumped into the 3 big questions for a while, and it really did help us. Although, as frantic as things have become, we've probably dropped the ball there a little bit. At least I know that I have. But in the book, he goes through, there's this mother who is trying to understand business and how it can apply to running a family as well as we run a business. I've heard it said in the past that the most important organization you'll ever run is your family. And maybe it's in this book that I heard that. I don't know. I've heard that said. And the problem with that is we sort of let our family life just kind of happen organically. Like, we're rushing around, we're doing whatever. But we know every sort of metric and KPI and everything that it could ever exist in our business. And so she's trying to figure out, how do I apply that level of intentionality to my family? And she asks this connection of hers to walk her through some of those things. How do I learn these business principles, apply them to my life? Now, what's interesting about that in the context of this made for this conversation is that's really, really relevant in terms of how we can be as intentional about our work or our hobby or our goals or whatever. How can we be as intentional about those things, or how can we be as intentional as we are with those things on living out our made for this? Understanding who we are, how we're wired, what we're good at, what we're not good at, and understanding how to apply those things and develop those things into being in our made for this, living that every day, living on purpose, living on mission, all of those things. And so the mission, maybe we'll do an episode in the future about just your personal mission statement or your personal vision statement, but I want to talk really briefly on the value statements. And so Lencioni talks about in this book, there's 4 different styles of value statements. There are your core values, and that's what I'm going to actually end with, because that's where I want us to land. But beyond the core values, there are accidental values, there are permission to play values, and there are aspirational values. So let me break down what these actually look like. The aspirational values are things that you really want to happen. You really want these to be core to who you are. You really want these values to exist in you. That's what makes them aspirational. And by definition, that is also what makes them not part of who you are today. Like, you may aspire to be a lot of different things in your life. You may aspire to be the best public speaker, and you may aspire for one of your core values to be, I am a great speaker, or whatever. And if that's not true, but you really want it to be, then that's maybe something that you can work on and develop. In our made for this language, that would be one of those skills that you can start to develop, whether or not it's a natural strength or not. But that would be something that you are aspiring for your future. That's an aspirational value. The next one is a permission to play value. Now, these are going to sound really familiar because your company that you work for, or the church that you go to, or the nonprofit that you're involved with, or whatever, probably has some core value statements that sound exactly like these permission to play values. And what Lencioni calls these is really, these are the values that all of us need to have just to get to play the game. These are the integrities and honesties and teamwork and hardworking and all of those things. These are the things that really shouldn't be core values because they should just be part of who you are. And so I would say that all of those things, you should be a person of integrity, and you should be tenacious and hardworking and a team player and all those things. Those are things that you should be, but those things are not what differentiate you from anyone else. And that's where, it doesn't necessarily fit inside of You're Made for This, because I would say that in order to play the game, you should possess those values. So those are your permission to play values. Now, the third one is your accidental values. Okay, and these are interesting because these are things that have become part of who you are accidentally. Like, you didn't intend for this to happen. You didn't maybe even notice that it had happened, but it has happened. And so the example he uses in the book is that they had this company, and all of a sudden they recognized that everyone on their staff had a young child and was always talking about changing diapers, and was like the rhythms of their day-to-day lives and their conversations were all based on this thing that wasn't actually part of their company values. It was just that they all happened to be in this stage of life. And so if someone else stepped into that environment, they may not feel like they belong there because they don't fit that value. Maybe they don't have young kids. Maybe their kids are older. Maybe they have no kids. And so I would challenge you to start to ask yourself the question, like, what might some accidental values of mine be? Like, maybe it's I'm a night owl, and I'm just now recognizing that I stay up way too late every night, and that impacts me in these other ways. And maybe it's not negative ways, but maybe that's something that has just sort of organically, accidentally happened, and it's something that you could start to either recognize in ways that you can start to correct, or just recognize in ways that you can start to notice that these are valuable for me and I can double down on these things. Either one of those may be the case. So that's your three. Your accidental values, your aspirational values, and your permission to play values. So I would challenge you, if you're listening to this, wherever you are, take some time to write those down. So what are the things that have kind of become part of my personality, my persona, that I didn't even intend to happen? They just kind of became that accidentally. Write those down. And then your aspirational values, like, what are the things that I want to be part of who I am? Write those down, and maybe try and figure out, like, what would it take for you to develop toward those things? Because often, if not always, our aspirational values are really, really powerful and valuable and important things that we just have not been able to, or have not done the work to develop, to achieve. And then your permission to play values. I would say that, number one, start to navigate, are there any of these that you don't have that you should? If that's the case, then how do you start to develop those things? Maybe it's the hardworking thing. I would hope that if you're listening to this and you're a growth-minded type of person, that the integrity and those types of things are permission to play values for you already. But maybe, the hardworking thing is something that you need to develop. If that's you, figure out what that looks like and start to put those in place. Okay, so those are your three. I want you to take some time, if you're listening to this, write those down. If you're, and I'll leave some links or some prompts in the show notes of this episode, and you can kind of start to walk through what those look like. The last one of those is your core values. Now, this, I definitely want you to take the time to do this exercise as well, but your core values are those things that are so fundamentally part of who you are today, that you can't imagine going against those things. One of the questions that we love to ask on the podcast all the time is, what are the immutable things about you? And that's part of what makes up You're Made for This. That's part of what makes you uniquely you. The things that if you turned off, if you muted these things, then you would be sort of betraying who you actually are. And that's sort of what your core values look like. Another way that I've heard this explained is, if you are a business owner or a organizational leader of some kind, your core values are those things that you are not going to be willing to bend on, even if that means a customer is going to walk out the door. And so for us here on the Made for This podcast, one of our core values is that we believe that everyone has a seat at the table. Everyone has a place that they can belong. That's part of what Made for This is. Made for This is figuring out where your unique seat is. And so everyone's got that seat. And if someone is going to sort of jeopardize that, or if someone's going to say, no, I'm taking this and this and this, and these are my seats, then we're going to be willing to watch those members of our community or our audience not engage with us anymore, because we believe so strongly that it's important for us to create spaces for people to navigate, discover, develop, and live. They're made for this. And that's just one example. I wish that I could think of another example. Craftsmanship. Craftsmanship is one of my business values. I run a video production company as my day job. This is, I guess, my side gig, or my side hustle, or whatever, side project. But one of my values, my company values, is craftsmanship. That is core to who I am as a business owner, and the things that I produce, I want them to possess that level of excellence that could be, as a craftsman. And so I am not going to be willing to bend on that to say, like, if there's a project that someone wants to be done for super cheap, and let's just do it cheap. You don't have to do it very well. I'm just going to turn that down, because I cannot, without, breaking my core values, not deliver the level of excellence that I'm capable of. Sure, I'm not Michael Bay or whoever his video camera operator is, but I'm going to do things to the very best of my ability, because I believe that craftsmanship is something that is so core to who my business and myself are, that I'm not willing to bend on that thing. And I'm willing to watch customers walk away. I'm willing to watch money walk out the door if that's something that they expect me to bend on. So, okay, we've got our 4 sort of styles of value statements here. We've got our permission to play, our core values, our aspirational values, and our accidental values. I want you to take some time and just walk through what those could look like in your life. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to start to recognize, as you see, particularly the core values, start to recognize how those things present themselves in your Made for This. If you haven't listened to any of our other episodes, I would highly encourage you to go back and listen to episodes 3 and 4, where we talk about, and I'll link these in the show notes as well, but we talk about in those episodes how to start discovering and developing your Made for This. And there's a whole exercise that we go through. There's kind of 5 phases of it. And within that, and it's not part of our, formalized exercise, but within that, you will start to see, like, okay, my core values, the things that are so fundamentally part of who I am, that I can't bend on these things, you'll start to see those things appear in your Made for This. And it may be just how your personality is expressed in the world around you. It may be the things that you're so passionate about that you're screaming at the coach, I got to get in the game. Like, this is my moment. Like, you need to let me in. I want to play. Like the things that keep you up at night. Or maybe it's the things that you're naturally wired and inclined to be very, very good at, your natural strengths. But you will start to see these core values appearing in your Made for This. And so that's going to kind of wrap us up for this episode. Again, this is just more of a short sort of exercise episode as opposed to some of our more conversational interview style episodes. But if you enjoyed this, or if you'd like for us to do some videos on how to develop your own personal mission statement, your own personal vision statement, maybe you can get another solo version of me or Nikki, or a solo version of me or Nikki, or maybe Nikki and I and maybe a guest or two can come in and have some of these conversations. We would love to do those things, and we would love to just continue to help you navigate what this looks like in your life. So if that's you, if you enjoyed this and would like to see those, leave us a comment if you're on YouTube, or send us an email if you're listening on another platform, and we'd love to know that and start to work on what that looks like. Otherwise, if you just want to continue to hear some interviews, don't forget to subscribe, and we would love to hear from you. We would love to connect from you. We would love to know what it looks like for us to come alongside you on the journey of discovering, developing, and living your unique space in the world, your unique mission, your unique Made for This. So if that's you, interact with us however you can. If you're on YouTube, leave us a comment, like, subscribe, whatever. If you're on Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating. Just let us know how we can connect with you, interact with you, and continue to cultivate this community. And until next time, don't forget to go out there and discover, develop, and live your Made for This. We'll talk to you next time.